Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. It is Monday morning this week. It's 10:41. This is the week of Thanksgiving. I'm a huge Thanksgiving fan. I've said before, I'm really into the holidays. I always get into the holidays. Christmas, I usually get into it like kind of late though. I don't really get the holiday spirit going until like well, it happens more and more the closer I get to the actual holiday of Christmas. But I really love Christmas. It's been my second favorite holiday. Halloween's probably my favorite. Although this Halloween, I love Halloween to death, but this Halloween was probably the shittiest Halloween I've ever had. I had a gig about a week or two before Halloween, which was fun, and it was like there was a couple other bands playing, and it was kind of a Halloween costume party thing, and everybody dressed up, and it was fun. But I felt like it took place so like it felt like it didn't feel like a Halloween event for me at all. Because it was like 2 weeks or so before Halloween, but it was still fun, or a week or before Halloween. I like to do things on actual holidays. So then, Halloween's my favorite holiday, and then I didn't really have any plans. It was like on a Thursday night, so I decided to I was gonna do have a little party, and so I invited. First, I had this idea of like, okay, I'm gonna invite a couple of friends over, and the thing I wanted to do, and it's a tradition that I always have, is for Halloween I always watch John Carpenter's Halloween. I always watch that on Halloween. That's always my staple. And then the other movie I always watch on Halloween is Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. Those are those are the only two things that I do differently that are totally seasonal. I'll watch the Halloween movies or Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, out throughout the year. Like it doesn't have to be in Halloween and in the month of October. But I have a tradition and I've always done that. So what I had this plan was to have a little party. But I just initially invited like a couple of friends over, and we were gonna. Last year I got a really beautiful edition of Halloween, the original from John Carpenter on Blu-ray, really beautiful edition, and I have numerous copies of it. But I really wanted to get the definitive copy, and then I have Halloween 2, pretty good version of that on Blu-ray. So the plan was I was gonna we'll get some pizzas, and I'll have some food here, some drinks, and it was gonna be pretty mellow, and we're gonna have get some candy, and we're gonna watch both of those films on Blu-ray back to back. So I reached out to a couple of friends about that, and they were like, "Yeah, let's do it. That sounds awesome." So I was like, "Great." And initially I was like gonna just have a couple of people over, but then I invited about 4 or 5 other people, and then it became more of a party thing where I was gonna have a sizable group over. So at that point, I was like, all right, great. So then I got on the day of and everything, I got a little bit more food, and I planned it a little bit more, and then everything was good to go. I was super excited, and nobody showed up. Like literally nobody showed up. I'd gotten 2 giant pizzas and all this food, and literally nobody showed up. It was one of the weirdest nights, and I was just like, fuck this. And I ended up hanging out at home watching Halloween by myself. But that's the last time I do that for a while. But anyway, and when it comes to Christmas, like Christmas movies, I won't watch any. I definitely will not watch Christmas movies other than the holiday. In December, I'll start watching Christmas movies. There's a ton of great Christmas movies. I'm a huge fan of Christmas movies. I always do a series of shows on Christmas movies. I definitely can't watch any Christmas based films outside of Christmas time. Really, it's kind of funny. The only movie I probably have watched is Black Christmas, which is one of the greatest slasher movies of all time. I've watched that a bunch of times outside of the season, but that is such a seasonal movie. But anyway, so today's show, I've been watching and revisiting the Superman franchise, particularly around the Christopher Reeve franchise. And this video is part two to just a really unusual thing that happened to me while I was watching these films. And I watched, so I did, yeah, oh my God, what a fucking movie. So I love the first two. They're great. They're iconic, and I'm really excited about doing a show. I just finished Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, and all I have to say is mind blown. I'm not going to say anything else because I'm going to probably do that video tomorrow, a review, and I watched it last night, and I was just like, I couldn't believe what I was watching, and I was just blown away by it. And so I started watching Superman Part 3 the other day. I think it was the night before last. And it came out in 1983. Of course, it's the third film, riding on the heels or coming right after Superman, the first two Superman movies, which are iconic films, and just amazing films. Um, and this film, I have to say, was like I tried watching. So I started watching it, and it stars Richard Pryor. It has such a weird cast. This film is so um oh my God, like it has, well, Christopher Reeve is back, Richard Pryor, Margaret Kidder, um, Jackie Jackie Cooper, Robert Vaughn, which is one of the strangest things, it's one of the strangest aspects of this film. So I started watching it the other night, and I just couldn't believe how fucking terrible this movie is. My first impression, like, again, I've seen the first two Superman movies so many times that I can't really say how many times I've seen it. Those movies were just, it was like when I was a kid. It was like I got really into. I like Star Trek too, but I'm more of a Star Wars guy, and I was like that with Star Wars. I became a huge Star Wars fan. Um, so I used to watch those movies, the first three films, you know, constantly, like just all the time. I'd watch A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back. I've seen like those movies a bazillion times. There's no way I could say how many times I've seen them. Even Return of the Jedi. And the same thing with the first two Superman movies. I've seen them so many times I can't even count. But the funny thing is I got this box set. Um, I got this box set about 2 years ago, and it's a DVD collection of all of the Superman movies, including the more, well, it's been a few years since it's been out, but including Superman Returns with Brandon Ruth, which is an okay movie. It's all right. I kind of want to watch it, but I don't know. Just because I've been doing all of these Superman movies, and I've been just start out, the plan was to start out or just cover the Christopher Reeve movies, and so I'm seeing how it feels, and maybe I'll watch Superman Returns, but I kind of want it to be about the Christopher Reeve movies, but we'll see. So, but that film also is included in this, and that's with Kevin Spacey, of all people, who plays Lex Luger, which is kind of a weird thing. But um, so I've seen the first two Superman movies a billion times at least, and the other two, Part Three and Part Four, Quest for Peace, I have only seen probably a couple times, which is really weird. Quest for Peace, I've probably only seen once, which is the one I just watched last night, and then the same thing with Part Three. I've seen that a few more times, and so I started watching it the other night, like 2 nights ago, and I couldn't get through it. I just thought this movie was so boring, so bland. Um, and it's such, like, they tried to make this film into such a a slapstick comedy, and it's like, and they have Richard Pryor in it, who, back in his prime, in his heyday in the 70s and 80s, like, he was one of the most iconic, one of the greatest kind of comedians ever, in his prime. And he's in this film, and it's so awkward seeing him in this film because the way the way they've written his like his role in the film, like his character, and the writing for his character is just so bad, and he's like so not funny, and he's like trying to do all of these puns, and with Vaughn too, they have this whole thing of where they try to do this slapstick comedy, and it's so ridiculous. Like, and it was it got so I got about 40 minutes into the movie, and I finally was just like, this movie is painful as hell to watch, and I couldn't watch it. I stopped it, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I stopped the movie, and I was just like, man, this movie is trash. This movie is trash. And then so I stopped it, and then I got up yesterday and I was going to do a show on Superman 3. And I was looking, usually when I do these videos, I always do a little, a little bit of extra research before I do a video. I'll look up the movie, do a quick like recap of the director of that film, of the film that I'm going to talk about, especially the year that it came out and the cast. I usually do like a quick little run through, and then I roll tape. So that's typically what I do. And when I was doing that for Superman 3, I was looking at the kind of the synopsis, and they were saying how this film, there's a by the second third chapter they attempt to there's this big time arc in the character of Superman, Christopher Reeve, where he essentially becomes infected by this new strange strand of kryptonite, and essentially becomes evil. So I was like, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. This movie is terrible and awful, but I kind of want to see Superman turn bad. So I broke up. I did a review yesterday, which was, I labeled it as part one, and basically it was me just saying my experience up into like the 40-minute mark, and just how terrible this movie was. But I was willing to give it a chance because I kind of want to see Superman become an evil person. So So later that night, or last night, I continued to watch it, and I have to say that it just got worse. Um, Superman 3, I think, is one of the worst sequels I have ever seen in my entire life. Like, it's literally one of those movies where it feels like the filmmakers and the studio were literally grasping for straws as far as what they, you know, what they should do to maybe give something new to the audience. I don't know what, like, I literally have no fucking idea what they were thinking because, first off, just at face value, Superman 3, I feel is just, it doesn't even feel like a Superman movie. It's so bland. It's so boring. The action sequences, the kind of the even the concept of, like, who the villain is. Where basically Richard Pryor is this computer genius that's essentially hired by Robert Vaughn, who is like this billionaire madman, and he hires Richard Pryor because he realizes he's this computer genius, and what they're going to do is tap into this mega satellite in space and basically, control the weather and bring about all of these catastrophes, earthquakes, and famine, and all of these things. And this is like kind of this is what what this new villain is supposed to be about, or villains, and it's so terrible. Like, I'm just like, what? And in the way they use Richard Pryor, like I said, one of the most iconic comedians in his day, but he's so bad in this film. Like, there's so many attempts to make this film funny, and the comedy is so bad. This movie is so cringeworthy. And this new thing with, apparently, Clark Kent's new, or Superman's new love interest. Because up until this point, it's Lois Lane. Like, that's, Superman, the Superman mythology, it's incredible action. It's the all of those iconic moments around of what Superman does to protect, people and societies and worlds, and fights for good and all of these things. Like that's, an integral part of it. But it's also a love story, between him and Lois Lane. And suddenly it's like that doesn't happen or isn't even a thing. And it's just really strange because there's all these scenes of where Clark Kent in the third one, where he goes back to Smallville, his town that he grew up in, and goes back to his like high school reunion and kind of courts this girl that he had a crush on when he was in high school. And it's just so stupid and like so like so poorly written, and the action sequences in this film are just like there really isn't there really isn't anything exciting. They're so bland, and I'm just like, what the hell were these people thinking to follow up, especially Superman 2 with General Zod. General Zod, Terrence Stamp, has some of the most incredible and some of the the greatest action sequences ever, especially in a comic book movie. And when you think too that these films, especially the first one, were the first of its kind. Now we're inundated with superhero movies, but this was these came out. The first one hitting 78, and so these films were so ahead of its time, and they really were prophetic that way, and they're great films, and I don't know what they were thinking, especially part two, which is such an amazing film. I almost think it's better than the original, as good as it is. And they followed up with like something that is so bland, misdirected, misguided, and boring, and it's they're trying so hard to make this into this like slapstick comedy, but it's so bad and it's so goofy. There's like zero content in this film that is something that has weight or like a sense of serious, um, something that you know where there has like some value to it or like a serious kind of concept. There's like it's void of any of that. It's just chock full of just really terrible writing. And I feel like this movie is so boring. Just on top of the terrible direction and the terrible writing. Um, I feel this movie was physically painful to watch. I tried watching it. I've tried finishing it last night because I really wanted to see what this was about as far as Superman becoming evil. I had only seen this movie maybe once or twice, and it was years ago. And obviously, I know why that was the case. But I couldn't believe it. I was dumbfounded, and I tried watching it again. I tried finishing the movie from where I stopped, and I got about 40 minutes in initially. I did this little video on that on just the 40 minutes, which I don't ever do, so it's kind of funny. But and I watched it from where I left off last night, and I couldn't get through it. I couldn't make it to the end. It just got more painful. It actually got worse. Um, One of the worst movies I've ever seen, where a movie physically makes you feel like sick, and you just can't take it. Like it's really bad. One of the last films that I had that experience with was the live action version of Cats, the musical. Um, that is one of the most god awful movies I've ever seen in my entire life. No redeeming quality whatsoever. Um, I could see that film, and probably this film too. Um, that if you're like a prisoner of war, that could be something that you are forced to watch. Um, Either of those films, like it's just it's unbelievable. And I love a lot of films that people consider to be trash and garbage. But I will get into that again because that for me is the case big time with Superman Quest for Peace. So I'm really excited about talking about that movie. That movie hit me like I felt like I was in a tornado. But this movie, Superman 3, is so. This movie should be just eradicated from civilization. Um, I couldn't believe how bad it is. It's easily one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and it's easily the worst in the franchise, in the Superman franchise. Like it's just it's an aborted atrocity. Um, yeah. But thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.